everyone, Miss Carrie here with Miss Carrie's Creations. Today I'm sharing a puppy birthday card that I created for the Craft Roulette Challenge. This past week the parameters required a fun fold, rich hues, a birthday theme, and a bottom border. If you've not heard of Craft Roulette, you can see by this screenshot that it is a really fun show to watch. To learn more about it, you can click on the link in my description below and join me for the next challenge. Alright, let me show you how my card came together and how I used each of the parameters. Here are some of the supplies we're going to be using today. I have cut a card base out of sapphire cardstock at 7 inches by 5.5 inches. I have cut an inside piece of the Candid Moments scrapbook paper at 4 inches by 5.25. And then we have another piece of paper that's from our mix-ins, and it's been cut at 4 inches by 2.5 inches. I also have 2 rounded tags that I cut using our Buildable Tags thin cuts. One has been cut out of sapphire, the other out of pattern paper. And I have a picket fence that I cut using a die cut in my collection from White Daisy. All right, we have one more cut to make before we start building our card. So this little sapphire tag is going to be a window for our shaker element. I'm going to take this window die from the Buildable Tag set, and I'm going to be centering it there on the sapphire tag, and then I'm going to go off camera and cut this image out. Now that everything's been cut out, we're going to start building our card. The first thing I need to do is score the card base at 4.25. So I've placed the long edge along the top of my paper cutter and created that score line. Now I'm going to score my tag. I've placed the long edge against the top of the paper trimmer, and then I am going to score the straight edge of the tag at 1/4 inch. This fold at the base of the tag is going to hold our little flap in place when we assemble the card. Now I do want some of that pattern paper showing at the bottom of my flap, so I'm going to go ahead and trim off some of that sapphire tag so that it actually looks like a window on top of my striped tag. So all I did was cut off the curved portion of that tag. So to create the base, I'm going to go ahead and fold along that score line. And then I'm going to open up the card so the lighter side of the cardstock is facing up. Before I adhere the pattern paper to the inside of the card, I need to attach the flap to the right side of the pattern paper. You want to use a strong adhesive to attach the tag to the pattern paper so that it doesn't shift when that flap is being opened and closed. I'm going to be using a little bit of score tape along that flap, and then I'm going to adhere it to the back of the pattern paper. I'm also going to be using some score tape and a tape runner to adhere this pattern paper down into the center of the card. I just want to make sure everything's nice and secure so that the flap doesn't disconnect from the card when it is opening and closing. Now, if you don't have a tag die, you could cut a tag from your Cricut, or you could cut a rectangle shape and form the same type of flap for the front of your card. So this is how the card is going to open and close with that little tag flap. Let's go ahead and continue putting together the rest of this card. So we're going to go ahead and adhere this little fence die cut along the bottom of that blue patterned paper. I chose to use this fence because it kind of goes along with the little dog that I'm going to have sitting on that tag, and it's going to make it look like he's sitting in front of a fence. This also fulfills the requirement to have a bottom border on my card. All right, I'm going to go ahead and trim off the excess, and then I'm going to adhere this piece of paper to that bottom flap on the card. The next thing we're going to do is build that little shaker window. So we have this frame that we've already cut out, and it's going to be adhered onto that little tag flap. I'm going to be using some Cricut acetate. These come in 12 by 12 sheets. You can purchase them on the Cricut website using the link I have in the description below. These acetate sheets cut really easily on your Cricut machine or your paper cutter. I've gone ahead and cut this down a little bit smaller than that little window frame I created. Because they are designed to be cut on a Cricut machine, they do have a protective film on both sides of the acetate. I'm going to go ahead and remove that protective film before I adhere the acetate onto the back of the window frame. I'm just going to do this with a little bit of liquid adhesive, and then I'm going to place the acetate down onto the back of the window. I'm going to use a little stamping block here to weigh everything down and set it aside to dry. While that glue is drying, I'm going to go ahead and stamp my little dog image for the front of my card. I've grabbed a piece of white daisy cardstock here, and I'm going to be using some intense black ink to stamp the image. I'm going to be using some watercolor pencils to shade in this little puppy dog today. I've just grabbed a couple of shades of brown, and I'm going to use it just like a pencil for this method. I call this method the dry surface method. I have a little tutorial on my blog that explains all 4 ways to use watercolor pencils and a little video that goes along with it here on my YouTube channel. I've started out with a darker shade of brown, and I'm shading in all of the shadow areas on this little puppy dog. After I have added some of the darker shades, I'm going to bring in a lighter color pencil, and I'm going to color in the image where there might be some lighter shades because of light hitting certain areas of the dog, or maybe because his fur is colored lighter in those areas. Now, watercolor pencils can be used just like any other colored pencil, but in order to create that soft look like watercolors, you're going to need to activate them or add water to the pigment. Up to this point, I have just added color onto the dry cardstock. But after I have shaded with all 3 shades of brown, I am going to bring in a water brush to activate that pigment. Now, as I'm using the water brush, you're going to see that not only am I blending all 3 shades of brown together, I'm also pushing the darker shades into those shadow areas. So I'm actually brushing my brush more towards the darker tones of brown and allowing the water to just kind of seep out into the lighter shades to soften it. I did stamp this image on some plain white cardstock, and as I was blending all of the colors together, I realized I probably should have used watercolor cardstock instead, because the white cardstock there was kind of starting to ball up as I blended all of these colors together. So I would suggest that you choose watercolor cardstock when you're using your watercolor pencils instead of the white cardstock. To shade his little tongue, I'm going to be using what's called the pencil palette method, and I'm just going to be pulling the pigment directly from the tip of the pencil and using it to shade that cute little tongue. This method gives you a little bit more control over that pigment and allows you to add more or less color to your design. After the image has dried, I'm going to grab the matching die and cut out this little dog so we can finish putting together the card. I'm going to start by adding some foam tape to the back of that window frame. This is going to create a little barrier for all of our shaker elements inside that little shaker window. Now I'm going to pour some little confetti bits right onto the center of that tag flap. And I'm just going to use my finger to flatten them all down so that none of them get stuck inside of that window frame. I've also decided that I'm going to add a couple of red star sequins, just because this is going to be a fun birthday card and I wanted to add some other little elements inside that shaker window, and I thought stars would be the perfect addition to all of that colorful confetti. After adding all of that confetti and sequins to that little tag flap, I'm going to go ahead and remove the backing from the foam tape that I placed around that window frame, and I'm going to place the frame down onto the center of the tag. And now we have a cute little shaker window for the front of our card. Now you're going to notice here that my flap is sticking to the inside of the card. I did not take into account that shifting everything down and having a rounded tag was going to cause a little bit of that frame to stick out on the back side, which is causing some of the foam tape to show. I've just gone ahead and cut a piece of cardstock to match the size of that frame, and I'm going to adhere it to the back of the tag. And now I have a perfect spot to write a little happy birthday note in a white gel pen for the person who's receiving this card. I'm going to add that little dog to the corner of that shaker frame using some foam tape, so it looks like he is looking inside the window as he stands in front of the fence. Okay, so now we're going to add a couple of sentiments, and you're going to notice throughout the rest of the video, I'm going to be changing my mind quite a few times on that little word happy. I started out with a layered red, white, and black happy sentiment, and I heat embossed the word birthday onto a black piece of cardstock. And I thought these two went well together, but I just kind of felt like something was off. But instead of changing anything at the time, I decided to just kind of keep working with the card and see if all of these elements would start to come together. To add some more bold colors to the card, I grabbed some little flag pennant stickers from the little Candid Moments sticker sheet, and I decided to add 3 of those in red, yellow, and blue to the upper corner of that shaker window. Now, I chose these 3 colors because they match the confetti, and that red matched the happy sentiment, but I didn't like the 2 red elements together, so I once again changed that word happy to a darker color, which was kind of a navy blue color. And at this point, I'm still second guessing myself. So I went off camera, took a step back, and tried to figure out what might be missing. I needed to bring in some of that lighter blue onto the card to match the flag and start creating a visual triangle. I also removed that happy sentiment because I really didn't like the way it looked. And I decided that it needed something behind it. And so I brought in a circle sticker that is the same color as that blue flag and the blue zip strip. And now by adding this circle to the top of the card, we've created a visual triangle between those 3 blue elements. This is also going to anchor that happy sentiment in place and prevent it from looking like it's just floating there on the card. Now I want to bring in a few more black accents to the card, so I've grabbed a couple of these acrylic stars, and I'm going to glue them in place around the word happy. There's a lot of primary colors on this card, so bringing in black accents are going to help tone down those colors, and they're really going to help those sentiments pop on the front of the card. All right, let's take a look at this finished card that I created for the Craft Roulette Challenge. One of the requirements was to create a fun fold card, so I created this sweet little flap with the shaker window element, and you're just going to be able to use that to open up the card. The second requirement was to use some bold hues, and I chose to use primary colors. We have all of the little shaker elements inside there and the striped background and those primary colored flags. I've also added a bottom border by using that fence die cut to make it look like that puppy is sitting right there in front of the fence. And the final requirement was that it be a birthday card, and this definitely screams birthday, doesn't it? I can't wait to send it off. All of these elements came together, even though I had a few little struggles along the way. That's kind of how card making works. You start gathering all of your elements, you have an idea in mind, and you make changes as you go. I want to thank you for joining me today for another card making tutorial. I hope that this taught you a few new techniques that you plan on trying on your future card making projects. I do have a couple of other card making videos for you. You can go ahead and click on that playlist above. While you're at it, go ahead and hit that subscribe button so that you don't miss out on any of my future video tutorials. I hope that you have a wonderful week, and I can't wait to see what you create.